I'm doing right now. So I am proposing for my PhD dissertation two concepts. One is black queer feminist activism, and the other one is Afro-diasporical feminism. So I want to start from these concepts that I'm working on to refer how I am systematizing, if that's a word, the activism that I have been involved in, how I connect them. So with Black queer feminist activism, I want to talk about, first I want to locate it in the Afro-diasporical practice of resistance and continuous marriage. Marriage is I don't know if you know, like the practice of enslaved people who were like running away during slavery period. I want to como landscape or relate this Black queer feminist activism with the historical practice of resistance marriage in conversation with the context of in conversation in the Afro-diasporical como transits and relationships between these Black feminist subjects. So knowing that briefly, I just want to jump into the work that we have done, and the work that for me, Cruz Cuenci started during the 1990, la década de 1990, the early 2000s, and the work that they have been doing in conversation and promoting for all the young. I'm not that young already, but I was young, pretty young, in the early 2000s, so, and the work that they have promoted for younger generations. So Cruz Cuenci is one of the most powerful and decolonial and beautiful persons in the world. They have a hip hop group called Cruz Cuenci, and from there, from that location of, they have been pushing and working a lot in the Afro-Cuban community to talk about queerness, Black feminism, activism. So it creates a kind of like a movement of black feminists in Cuba, or promote for younger people to in hip hop. So starting from that,
so you want to show like the two videos so you get a sense of that?
Yeah, I would like to start with this video que se llama La Gorda. It was done in the early 2000s. See?
I bring a lot of music from my country, Cuba. Give it up for Cuba.
So, hay una imagen que poner como buscador contradicción en ritmo como and so I wanna start with this video because I came from a generation, like, these are my elders. These are like part of the Black women, queer and trans people that I politically come from, that taught me, and the Black epistemologies that my political activism and my position in academic right now are based in knowledge that these people share with me in the course of 10 years. So, of course, before, but I'm talking from when I was 21 to until 2000 and until the present, because this conversation keep having, no, it's a conversation in progress. So, Cruz Cuencis were kind of like, in my opinion, in conversation with works like Diane Saunders' latest book, is one of the most anti-colonial intervention that
we could find in the Caribbean that talks Spanish, even that denomination is complicated. So, and I want to start with that to show now another event that we host in 2014, January 31st, 2014. We did this como conference workshop called Contracciones, Jornadas de Arte y Queridad Afrocubanas. So these contractions were like the major expression, in my opinion, of how Black feminism in Cuba could get articulated in, can I see? Okay, so these jornadas, starting from the name, it suggests already like the queerness of the essence of the queerness of this space, and it was, yeah. So this space was really, for me, was very important because it was one of these spaces that I will show that picture that despite the tensions between the Black feminists in Cuba, we could host this space where I think it was the first time that in a space between academia and activism, we could make a bridge between Black feminism, locating this anti-colonial critique to heteronormative link with racism in that space, no? And from that, well, tensions keep happening, but I feel like this space was almost so important because first was one of the first spaces that we could, in collective, talk about and imposing our political standpoint as feminists, as queer, as trans people, and also as Black people. And second time, it was a bridge between our difference and create a platform so we can keep having conversations in the future. And now I want to show the Jornada de la Feminista, that it was an event that we created in 2017 in Chiapas. So La Jornada de Botran Feminista, like the name suggests, was an effort coming from very different feminist organizations in Chiapas, where Colectivo Afrocute that I was part of was into. So the Colectivo Afrocute really focused in trying to put in that lesbo, trans conversation, the Black voices. So one of the ways that we find to bring these voices was to bring Black people to Chiapas. So we invite Cruz Cubensi, we invite Daniel Chavez, Coleman Chavez, we invite also Michelle Candelaria de Colombia, we invite, also was there an Afro-Colombian feminist called Astrid Cuero Montenegro. So we tried to put Black people in that apparent white space, even though that is an indigenous territory, because es un territorio maya, no? So in this jornada, that the major topic was the alliance between lesbians and trans people, we create a Black queer feminist intervention through art also. And it was really good because the main focus that was this tension alliance between lesbians, between white lesbian and trans people, at one point start like not becoming the first object, like the main conversation, and the main conversation became like decolonial politics towards black and brown bodies in that space. So this alliance between white lesbians and trans people is an expression of white feminism. So because of that, and because we knew how complicated that space was, we tried to push the alliance in a way that not only talk about trans people, but it talks about black and indigenous trans and queer bodies in a context like Chiapas, which is the border, and because of that, it's even more colonial and control towards body who doesn't represent like the heterosexual stereotypes, and also bodies that are not white. So one of the best moments that I remember of this jornadas was the closing. So we were thinking how we're gonna close or finish these jornadas that were so beautiful, so conflicted, so it brought so many emotions for many of us. We have beautiful conversation between black women, trans people, with indigenous women and trans people too, and we were able to manage to that white feminists could, how can I say this, could not be the center of the conversation, as usually they are in Chiapas. So it was a beautiful and very powerful moment. And we want to finish that in which way? So we were thinking in doing a protest, but the main idea of public protest comes from Europe, you know, and comes from a different type of struggle that black and indigenous people we have been facing in Afro-America, which is the South America, and also the Caribbean. Like, white feminists were asking us to stop going to work on March 8th. I'm like, but I work in my house, or I do like domestic work, or I'm a sex worker. I'm like stop working that day doesn't work for me, you know, or that doesn't say anything to me. So this type of white feminist protest, it was it is a tool that works in some spaces, but it didn't. I don't think, like as a black and trans person, I don't think that works in the same way in Chiapas. So we were trying to think about this to culminate or end this event. So what we did is like, we want to be visible, and we want to do a protest that in some way recuperate the origins of black resistance. So we did a conga. The conga is the carnival dance and music of Cuba, the eastern part of Cuba. So we were trying to do a public dance on the main, how can I say this? The main andador, I don't know.
Pedestrian mall.
Exactamente. Thank you. Which locate the, San Cristóbal de las Casas is a city in Chiapas that is very close to the Zapatista movement. And because of that, we have a constant, we have something that we call it Zapaturismo. We have a lot of the international left, which means in left from the global north, also white, coming to San Cristobal. So from the last 10 years, San Cristobal has been gentrified with these people, and this pedestrian, how do you say?
Pedestrian mall?
This pedestrian mall, like Europeans, people from the US, people from Canada have bought all the business in this pedestrian mall, so, and have gentrified this place. So we were doing this black dance that celebrates life and resistance in the most heteronormative and commercial space that exist in San Cristobal. So for us, it was a beautiful thing, it was very powerful, and I just want to share with you what we did. I'm sorry. And there's another picture that shows, because this, and I want to also play this video. I think it's even better. So there are other pictures that you can see Black people at the core of this conga. And also, I want to show a poem that famous Black feminist Afro-Cuba Yolanda Arroyo did for this 1 hour. And the way that this poem also finished the whole event of 3 days. I want to share with you because it's so beautiful and amazing.
Si besan así, si se colocan ahorcajadas sobre ti, así, te quitan los panties, así, te desnudan entera, así, sí, te lamen así, sí se mueven así, lento así, rapidito así. Las mujeres te muerden la nuca así. Te acercan con su mano al cuello así. Te inmovilizan los brazos así. Te dan bofetadas gustosas así. Cubren tus ojos así. Te amordazan así. Aprietan tu garganta con la corbata así. Te abren la boca con sus dedos así. Derraman vino tinto sobre tu lengua, así. Beben del cielo de tu boca, así. Saborean tus dientes, así. Las mujeres te embisten así, con penetraciones invisibles que saben a gloria, así. Chocan sus caderas con las tuyas, así. Te escupen el clítoris, así. Dan palmadas adentro de tus muslos, así. Chocan su sexo con tu sexo, así. Hacen arepas, así. Hacen tortitas, así. Las mujeres sí provocan el orgasmo con la lengua, ay, así. Sobre el pubis, así. En cada labia, así. Empujando el mentón sobre tu vulva, así, derramadas en éxtasis, así, con su nariz dentro de ti, así. Las mujeres te embadurnan los dedos con saliva, así, te los meten así, 3, 4, 5, así. La mano cerrada como un puño completo, así. Te voltean de espaldas, así. Chupan tu aro, así. Te dibujan hikis en tu columna, así. Te hablan nalgas, así. Se colocan lubricante, así. Maniobran el dildo contigo, así. Y te penetran, así. Mientras te estimulan con el vibrador, así. Las mujeres se vienen así, gritan así, jadean así, sudan así, tiemblan así, lloran abstraídas de placer así, te abrazan así, vuelven a besarte así y no te dejan ir nunca, nunca más así, te hablan así. Las mujeres sí hablan así.
So I wanna end this small presentation saying that these actions that we have done in Cuba and in Chiapas are not isolated. They're part of a very large and historical ways that Black women, queer and trans people, we travel these spaces, and the effects of these travelings are actions like this. But also we are, if we put in a map all the Aviala, I mean the whole continent and the Caribbean, we can see a constant dialogue between Black feminists from, I'm gonna refer right now the conversation that I'm having at this moment, or at least in the last 5 years. Conversation with Black feminists from the Caribbean, conversation with Black feminists from Brazil, from Colombia, from Chiapas, from the United States, from Canada. So all these conversations are having place and they produce effects. And these effects, this is one of the consequences of this conversation. That's why it's important if we put it in a map, and the map will show where is the production of feminism. The first thing that we're going to see is that the feminist theory is produced in the North. But if we look deeper, we can see like the same Donna Haraway cyborg writing was based on the work of Black and brown women, and she said it. So for me, it's important to locate, to represent this Afro-diasporic conversation in a map, so we can see how, como above, ¿cómo se dice? Above this, below these big constructions of feminist theory, you're gonna see some submerged Black feminist theories or epistemologies, as Omisega Natchez-Tinsley proposed in her latest book, Ursula's Mirrors, that are feeding, or if I want to be gentle, that are feeding the feminist theory, but the feminist theory many times are not talking about where this knowledge comes from. So this Black queer activism is another way, first, to articulate all this knowledge, all these feminist actions and knowledge that also are produced at the same time. Because many times when we think about artivism or activism, we took out the part of the production of knowledge that they do. You know, so also art and political actions is another way to create knowledge. So we need to start to complicate how we see the production of knowledge in terms of coloniality. So these interventions, these actions, these space of debate are also producing knowledge that is common, that are like so shared in different ways than through the academic format. And for me, it's important to show that, and it's also important to know, to show the constant Afro-diasporical conversation that we have in races. That's first. The conversations that we're having and the production of knowledge that we are creating, and that is not something isolated. It's also an maroon effect of this historical way that we were put as Black people in the Avia Yala. So this is what I want to briefly show to you. So I'm very grateful for the space, and I'm very open to any questions, suggestions, interchange, feedback. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
sorry, I have to go to class. But I thoroughly enjoyed this. I will email you all with some questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hopefully we have another space. But thank you so much for your time.
All right, so we've got 15 minutes for questions and discussion. So please, and don't feel shy, because I think one of these things too is like there might be like unfamiliar context or things you want to ask questions about, so please do. And please share things that you might know about and want to connect, or ask some basic questions. How did you come into this book?
I am curious how Tito came to this work. I missed the first 12 minutes. I don't know if you can see pizza.
You're curious what?
How you came into this work explicitly the way that you're doing it.
Well, the thing is, like, I am part of the Black queer feminist movement, so I have the privilege to access through academia. Very young. I mean, all my life is I've been preparing myself to be in academic spaces as a way, also another way of resistance. Have in mind the possibilities that Black people have in Cuba to survive. So, yeah, and in that way, so when I finished my master's degree, I was so into Black feminist activism in Cuba that I started to write with the help of Professor Margaret Cerulo and Hardesty. I started to write a paper about what we were doing in a way to archive what this Black queer activism was doing. I'm still haven't been published, but bueno, I'm working on that. And after that, I started this PhD in Chiapas, and I was like, so now because I'm in Chiapas and I'm researching something else, I need to, how I'm going to talk about with the work that I have done before, the work that my elders have done in Cuba, and how that como feed the work that I'm doing here, and the transit of some of these elders that are taking place in Chiapas too, because one of the most important things about Las Jornadas Lesbo-Trans Feministas, it was that our effort to bring Black people to that space, no? And those Black people were the people that I know, como Cruda Cubensi, Yolanda Arroyo Pizarro, Astrid, Michelle Candelaria, that is a Black feminist trans woman from Colombia. Like, so this is not an isolated event, and that's why I am proposing this idea of Afro-diasporical feminism, so we can highlight that it's not isolated, we are always in connection, we're producing knowledge that is not from the moment, that is conversation with historical ways of resistance, and challenge a little, and focus also in this Black feminists that we are producing in the global south, I mean, in South America, Afro-America, and the Caribbean. Because also there is another concept, like Black transnational feminism. But that concept in my idea, and following the work of Professor Angelique Nixon, which criticized that this Black transnational feminism is not taking in mind the relationship between the global north and the global south. Like, even though it's a Black feminism, the way that this Black feminism, the way that it travels, and the academic imperialist background that has the academic that is produced in the global north, these conversations are not horizontal. They are like there is a level of there are differences that we need to have in mind. So in this way, I want to put my attention, instead of this transnational Black feminism that many times invisibilize what a lot of Black women in the Caribbean and Afro-America are doing, I want to put my attention in what we're doing. And in a very different way that Black transnational feminism does. Because Black transnational feminism, in my idea, is just Black women from the US going everywhere. Mm-hmm. So Afro-diasporical feminism, for me, is like Black women from the Caribbean and Afro-America trying, which is so different because we don't have a US passport, Black women, trans and queer people trying to connect with each other with all the barriers that exist that are not just geographically.
Would you talk about what it's like to be queer or trans in Cuba today?
Well, I also want to say, like, I have a very privileged experience, even though that I'm a Black person in Cuba. I grew up as a Black person in Cuba. So my experience cannot, even though it was really hard, of course, because it's a Black trans body in the conditions. I feel like my experience cannot express the enormous difficulties and the enormous violence that especially trans women, Black trans women, and Black trans men or trans masculine people, non-binary people, and lesbians live in Cuba. So I don't want to speak for the collective, so I can say just my experience. No, it's really hard. It's really hard also because Cuba is a totalitarian country. So they're like it's a totalitarian country based in a white mestizo idea of a Latin American nation. And we are in the Caribbean, 80% of the population is Black. And they keep saying, you know, the Cuban government speech until today, from the last decades of the 19th century to the present, is that in Cuba we all Cubans, and there's no difference between each other. So 1961, Fidel Castro's speech reinforced that idea. So everything that left this norm, also having in mind this idea of the new man from Che Guevara, that is heteronormative, white, middle class presentation of masculinity, everything that goes from that was highly persecuted by the Cuban government during 1965 to the 70s. They had other politics in the 80s. So the special period was the moment where the Cuban government couldn't support this in a way that, even though that was persecuted before, from the 1990s to the present, they cannot hide anymore. Also because this Black queerness was used to the government used it to exoticize even more Cuba as a tourist product, no? So in that environment, I think like my experience was to fulfill the idea of a mulatta woman or to reveal to this stereotype. I have the possibility, hopefully, maybe, I don't know if it's a possibility or I didn't have another way to reveal